Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you. This should actually say that the majority of you are fucked. I will tell you why you are fucked, and it might not be immediately obvious, because we are living in great times. We have unprecedented wealth, we have peace, and we have political freedoms like which we have never seen before. But there are some things in the future, and there are some current trends that, quite frankly, scare me, and trends that I think business students should adapt for. And one of those things is automation. So automation is not exactly something new. It has been around for centuries, as long as we have had industrializations, we have had automation. Kind of began to gain steam around 2 centuries ago, when the weaving machines began to be automated. So imagine if we go back to late medieval Europe, we're visiting a small town or a small village, and the streets smell of mud and burnt wood, and everywhere around us, people are engaged in manual labor and primarily agriculture. And during our travels, we meet this guy who's a weaver. He weaves blankets. This is a terribly slow process. His job is dominated by routine. His output is severely limited because he can only produce 1 blanket at a time, and weaving a blanket takes a shitload of time. So basically, this guy is a huge bottleneck in the production of woven products. Now we say hello to Jacquard. Jacquard was a French merchant, trader, and inventor who invented what's called the programmable loom. We had seen weaving machines before. This was special because now we could actually program weaving machines. We could build a weaving machine, feed it a punch card, and we could get a blanket, with the pattern that we wanted based on a punch card. I mean, as you can imagine, this became a huge success. These merchants, they were not CBS graduates, but they did have some understanding of falling long-term average cost and why that's a pretty good thing. So within 50 years, this guy was replaced by a punch card, and we had the programmable loom. Automation began, continued to influence these small villages. Inventions in agriculture meant that fewer people could be employed in agriculture. The effect of this was that more and more people left the villages because the employment opportunities were no longer there. They could no longer seek jobs on farms, so they moved to the cities, seeking new opportunities. And as expected, the share of labor working in agriculture took a sharp decline and continued to decline, despite productivity and output actually increasing. Simultaneously, the employment in industry and service began to skyrocket. And when we talk about automation today, a lot of people falsely believe that the automation we are facing is similar to the automation faced 200 years ago. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So innovation prior to, let's say, the 1950s was mostly dominated by inventions that were mechanical or chemical or biological in nature. We had the leftover technology from the Nazis after World War II enabled the space race. We had jet propulsion, jet engines made international travel easier than ever before. We had breakthroughs in medicine which eradicated entire diseases. But around 1970, something drastically changed. And what changed was that we said hello to this fellow, this species, I guess, and he said hello back to us. And this is, of course, the computer and the rise of information technology. And the thing about information technology is that IT innovation is exponential in nature. It moves ridiculously fast, much faster than any kind of automation we have seen before. And the consequence of this is that whereas our German weaver from the late medieval village would have ample time to re-educate, he would have ample time to resettle, seek new careers, this is unfortunately not the case today because automation is moving so fast that people simply don't have the time to really readjust. And automation is not something that's in the future. It is here now. It is affecting us now. It will continue to affect us. And the effect is, so apparent if you actually look at the data. So now the first graph here, we have the rise of wages and the rise of productivity. And funnily enough, around the 1970s, a gap started to appear between the rise of productivity and wages. That gap has continued to grow. And it makes sense because obviously as machines replace humans, as humans are let go, as opportunities for humans no longer appear, the profits that previously would have gone to compensate workers now flows unhindered to the top of the company's executives, which as a side effect, the compensation of executives today is just skyrocketing, whereas normal wages are either falling or they are stagnated. The second effect is the labor force participation rate, which has also actually continued to decline since the 90s. Of course, a big part of this is not direct automation. A big part of this is the baby boomers leaving the economy. But even if you adjust for the baby boomers, it becomes apparent that young adults, primarily aged 18 to 34, are having a harder time than ever finding entry jobs. They're having a difficult time to bring to the workforce because the jobs that would previously be available to them are now being staffed by robots. And the last, I have a lot more data than this, but the last graph I'll show you is probably the graph that scares me the most. And this is the labor share of national income. So labor share of national income, what that is basically the percentage of an economist's national income that goes to wages. So essentially, it's how much is being used to compensate the workers. And this has always been dominated by recessions. As you can see, every dark line has a recession. But the trend we see now is actually that the labor share of income is falling, and the peaks are getting, are getting lower, and the troughs are getting deeper. So overall, profits continue to flow. Profits have never been better, but workers are no longer compensated as we would expect them to be, since the work is being done by machines and not by humans. And of course, automation, people usually assume that that's related to manual labor. We are business students, we are masters of the universe, we are not going to be replaced by machine. Unfortunately, automation is not just a concern for manual labor. It is increasingly also replacing white-collar jobs and jobs that people like UCBS students would usually be occupied with. And these are just some examples. The finance sector has been famously hit by automation. In year 2000, we had 140,000 employed on Wall Street. 2 years ago, I think they had 100,000, so that's a drop of 40,000 jobs. Some might say that, well, we had a recession, the finance sector isn't doing that well. That's bullshit. The profits in the financial sector have never been higher. So there's absolutely no evidence to say that these layoffs are caused by turmoil or by bad times for financial companies. Articles are increasingly being written by algorithms, surprisingly amount. I would say that if you find an article and it doesn't have a spelling error, the likelihood of it being written by a machine is probably like 50-50. If it has a spelling error, if it's a poor article, it's written by a human. If a program writes an article well, we won't be able to spot it at all. Companies like PwC and Deloitte continue to push robotics on themselves, on their clients. Associates are replaced by robots, and consultants are replaced by applications plugging into IBM Watson. And speaking of IBM Watson, it's also continuing to march into consulting, it's marching into healthcare, it's marching into journalism. So no, automation is not just an issue for people employed by manual labor. And of course, some might say like Emil, and I agree with Emil that it's, you don't have to learn to code. Well, I think that's kind of a defeatist attitude to take. Of course, you need to learn how to code. Fundamentally, kind of like what we're facing today could be compared to a new age of enlightenment. So age of enlightenment was this period in the 18th century with philosophers like Voltaire, revolting against this old status quo of dictatorships and monarchies. And what we're seeing today is actually kind of the same thing. Because today I think that coding is beginning to kind of become like a form of philosophy. And if Emil was born during the Age of Enlightenment, he might tell you that you don't have to write philosophy to function in this new age of philosophy, you just have to be able to read it. I disagree. I think that if we are to combat the effects I just showed you with rising productivity, declining wages, declining labor force participation rates, it is absolutely crucial that we take technology back in our hands, that we know not only how to use technology, but also how to create technology. It is not enough to just use technology. And there's a very real reason why that's not enough. And that reason is that in many cases, if you are working with an algorithm, so as an example, a lot of law companies are currently investing a lot of money in robotics, but they're not perfect yet, so they will have attorneys press yes or no if the algorithm got it right. That works for a while, but the algorithm, every time you're working with an algorithm, that algorithm is usually taking your input and training on that input in order to become better than you. So when you continue to work with technology, fundamentally you are feeding a monster that is going to just eat you eventually. And I'm telling you, instead of feeding the monster, you should just create your own monster, I guess. So, of course, programming has not the best rep. It's has some unfortunate negative stereotypes associated with it. Long, messy hair being one of them. But programming is actually not that mystical, and it's not that difficult. And in order to kind of try and dispel some of these myths, I came up with my own Broby's programming mythbuster. We're actually going to just go through some of the common stereotypes people have about programming. So first of all, you have to be a genius. No, you don't have to be a genius. I'm sure it helps, I wouldn't know. Being a genius generally makes it easy to be good at anything, but there is no reason you have to be extraordinarily intelligent or whatever to be good at programming, or even to program at all. Programming is fundamentally just very logical. If you can think logically, which you can because humans can think logically, then you can program. You have to be good at mathematics. This is kind of a yes or no question, because the mathematics you use when programming is not usually that complicated. It is addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, elementary school stuff. Of course, if you want to move up to the higher guys, people who do machine learning, AI, graphics, that's a lot more math heavy. You're going to have to do some linear algebra and stuff. But don't worry, if you want to play with the heavy guys in AI, you can always study that on your own. For most basic programming, you don't need more than addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Secondly, you have to be a nerd. No, I mean, look at these sexy pioneers of computer science. Who wouldn't want to be associated with these guys? No, I mean, yes, maybe you have to be a bit of a nerd, but at least you'll be a filthy rich nerd and not an unemployed business student. And I was trying to confirm some things. So it takes effort, persistence, and patience. That is true, but so does being good at anything. And if you don't possess these skills already, I think that programming can actually teach you them. Because programming, it is frustrating when a program is not doesn't run as you expect it to. It is frustrating to sit up at 3 a.m. and honestly have no clue why things aren't working. But it teaches you kind of a mindset that you don't quit before the task is done. Secondly, you have to be reasonably smart. You have to be reasonably smart to be good at anything, and you are reasonably smart. You are CBS students after all, most of you at least. And this is actually probably the most important reason why I think you should learn programming, besides obviously automation. Programming is about solving problems. It is about taking a big problem, dividing into smaller problems, and by solving smaller problems, you combine it into one big solved problem. And this, I mean, if you master problem solving, that has implications to literally everything you're doing. It will make you better at case competitions, it will make you better at I guess, math exams, just generally, you will pick on very naturally a framework of how to logically approach problems, how to logically break down problems, and how to solve them ultimately. It will teach you creativity. This is also actually very important. Programming, I consider a bit of an art. Just like an artist or a painter may take some paint and some paper, I guess, and start with nothing but end with a beautiful painting. A programmer starts with nothing. He starts with an empty code editor and give it 10, 12 hours, and he'll have a finished product. He will have what is essentially a product of his creativity. And this also actually carries over to business, because once you have learned problem solving, once you learn creativity, then spotting problems and figuring out ways to do them better, which essentially is what a lot of entrepreneurship is about, that becomes like second nature to you. Big problems become small problems, and small problems can be solved. This is a bit cliche, I guess. We need to change the world with something better. The programming community is incredibly entrepreneurial, and I think that's the reason why that is, as I just said, with creativity and problem solving. These guys possess a very special way to look at the world, and they possess some very specific skills that actually let them change the world relatively quickly. When I was studying computer science in Norway, I mean, every single student was working on some kind of project that he thought would maybe not make the world a better place. It could be something simple like an app for a drinking game. It could be an app for studying better, whatever. Every single student was kind of an entrepreneur. Every student had some kind of project that he was working on, something that he thought was lacking in the world, and he decided to create it. But if you want to create it, you have to have the tools for creating it, and the tools for creating things is ultimately, and I mean, will be probably forever, programming. So if you want to be a world changer, if you don't want to be enslaved by technology, but actually want to, I guess, unslave technology yourself, then programming is just such an essential skill. I think that in 50 years, not being able to program will be like not being able to read today. I mean, you will be a total idiot and useless to society, basically. So pick up programming for the love of God. And the time to program has never been better. There are so many resources online that you can use. This is just top of my head. Code Academy offers courses in programming. They didn't even pay me for this. They offer you courses in programming. Khan Academy also offers courses. Coursera, same kind of deal, free courses. Stack Overflow has answers to every programming question you have. It has never been easier to learn to code. So saying that you're not going to learn to code, I think that's a defeatist attitude to have in the world today. And at CBS, we have CBS Code. I don't know them personally, but I know they exist. And I think they can also arrange kind of workshops and stuff. And finally, attend hackathons, things like Junction, get out in the community, learn from people. As always, finding like a mentor is a good idea. So find someone you look up to, say that, hey, I want to learn to program. Can you maybe help me, whatever? But at the end of the day, coding appears difficult. It is actually incredibly easy. It is difficult in the beginning. It will require patience and persistence, but your payoffs will be exponential. Thank you.